Ace Bailey is set to be a polarizing top 5 pick. This is Floor and Ceiling. Let's break him down. When Ace Bailey has it going, you can see why he has star potential. The Rutgers wing is a supersized shot maker who can drill jumpers from anywhere on the floor. It doesn't matter if a hand is in his face or if a defender is draped over him. Thinking about recent drafts, Bailey reminds me of Brandon Miller, or if we go further back, Michael Porter Jr. This season, he averaged about 18 points and 7 rebounds. However, that also came with about 1 assist to 2 turnovers per game. Ace will score the ball, but the question is whether he can do enough of everything else at a high level. Right now though, let's start with what Ace excels at, which is undoubtedly his pull-up shooting. Bailey is around 6'9", 6'10", and he's very comfortable hitting shots off the dribble. At his height, and with that release point, Bailey's jumper is incredibly difficult to contest for most defenders. Right now, Ace is most comfortable from the mid-range. He made 36% of his 110 off-the-dribble twos this season, which is high volume. Sometimes, Bailey doesn't even need a single dribble to score. He can face up around the elbows or the baseline and pull up over the top using his size and his shot. Then, Bailey is also effective out of 1 or 2 dribbles when he gets into his move. I don't find the Rutgers prospect to be the craftiest or the quickest at reading a defense, but Ace is dangerous with the ball in his hands because it feels like he can rise into his pull-up out of any situation, even if he's falling out of bounds. In terms of creating space, Bailey's go-to is a turnaround jumper, often out of a jump stop. This is a difficult shot, make no questions about that, but it's not as difficult for him. Branching out to the three-point line, Ace made 10 of his 41 threes off the bounce, which needs to go up. The same tools that Ace uses to get into his middies apply here. Sometimes Bailey just pulls up, and he only needs a jab step or 2 to create space. This is easy for him if a smaller defender is the assignment. However, I also think that Ace's 3 is a good segue into a broader discussion about his shot diet. The percentage from downtown, like I said, must improve, and sure, he gets buckets from 2, but Ace's pull-ups right now are way more about volume than efficiency. At the same time, I also think it's logical to question whether the efficiency can truly go up in the long run, given the propensity that Ace has for tough jumpers. We've seen this all throughout his career, and not just at Rutgers. What I call Ace's tough shots are what someone else might call bad shots. Now, I don't think they're always that. I actually believe that Ace is such a tough shot maker that he can have some leeway, but these shots can objectively be bad. For me, the 2 main factors here are his physicality and his handle. Ace doesn't find it easy to create separation when he has to shake his defender instead of shooting over the top. His handle looks stiff, and his use of ball screens is very limited with how he cannot string out bigs or manipulate defenses. Ace's ball handling also contains the functionality of his athleticism, which in my opinion shows up way more off the ball, like we'll get into. Finally, Ace lacks strength, which ties into why he can't manufacture space. He'll get walled off by bumps, and then he doesn't have counters with his handle when that happens. More than that, I'm just worried that Bailey lacks counters as a whole when his jumper isn't falling. He's very inconsistent at putting pressure on the defense, let alone the rim. Plus, Ace is almost always looking to shoot, which is how he becomes predictable to read since he's not a natural playmaker or a quick processor. One could argue that Bailey doesn't really need to handle the ball if he can just shoot over most guys. I actually said this about Jabari Smith Jr. a few years ago, but I think that time has shown that the threshold, so to speak, to truly score in the NBA is higher than that. Bailey's freshman season at Rutgers reflected the player that he wants to become, but it also emphasized his biggest points of improvement. Thinking about Bailey in a more narrow role centered around finishing plays can really elevate his floor. This year, Bailey made 39% of his catch-and-shoot threes. Removing when he played against zones, that goes up to about 42%. And then, he also drilled 62% of his 20 catch-and-shoot twos. For me, Ace's short-term, and maybe even long-term, path to NBA success is his spot-up ability, which is an offshoot of his shooting ability. The 18-year-old has a quick release and a willingness off movement and against tight contests. All of that is great, don't get me wrong, but I want to stress that there also has to be a buy-in. Moving past the numbers and theory, we're dealing with human beings in basketball. If Ace has been playing a certain way his whole life, then it's not straightforward to suddenly become an off-ball, spot-up guy. There can also be an argument made that you're not drafting Bailey for this potentially high floor. Instead, you want Ace because you think that he can become a wing-sized ball handler who can create his own shot at will. Personally, I wouldn't be betting on him becoming that type of player, but I do understand the desire. At the same time, due to that adaptation that I mentioned, it is also unclear whether Bailey can become that off-ball threat that I imagine. However, if Bailey's role is narrowed down, then he'll be putting the ball on the floor when he attacks closeouts because he should be knocking down his catch and shoots. Most of the time, Ace will take a dribble or two inside into some sort of pull-up. That's fine for now. Clearly, it's what Bailey feels most comfortable doing, but again, I want to emphasize that he's not putting pressure on the rim. Eventually, I'll want to see Ace extend these attacks into looks at the basket rather than almost always quote-unquote settling for a jumper. In my opinion, finishing is Bailey's biggest improvement point as a scorer right now. He converted around 64% of his shots at the rim, which is decent, but not amazing. I like Ace's upside in transition. He doesn't have to attack a fully set defense, and then he can take advantage of his physical tools. When Bailey has a runway, he can put his length and his pop to solid use. I'm not sure that Bailey changes directions all that much. He still has room to become more flexible, but he has flashed a float over and a Euro step, even if it's a bit rigid. However, when we break things down more closely, I do get worried. In the half court, Bailey made just 16 layups in 30 games. That's incredibly low, particularly for a wing that's listed at 6'10" with real run and jump athleticism. Before anything, this also lets me know that Bailey cannot get to the rim enough, and we saw this reflected in the tape as well. I mentioned at the top of the video how Bailey's handle and strength must get better, and that's definitely imperative when it comes to his finishing. If I'm being honest, there were some bad misses this season. Ace looks uncomfortable against length, and most of all, against contact. However, again, if I'm being honest, he can get rushed against any sort of slide pressure. The package is there for Bailey to make decisions and attack off the catch, but he gets way too rushed. If the Rutgers prospect is going to toss up wild shots at the rim, then he's much better off taking those 1 or 2 dribble pull-ups, but he can't only be relying on that. Instead, I'm interested in seeing Ace cut and rebound even more. Bailey didn't do enough of these two things, especially the former, even though I think that he projects quite well in these two areas. The gist is that Bailey can tap into his run and jump athleticism without having to create space on the ball. He's not getting to the rim that way, but if he's running and cutting, then he can get to the basket. This season, the off-ball numbers were there, but not the volume. In fact, I thought that Rutgers could have had Bailey and Dylan Harper connect even more. Ace can play above the rim to catch lobs and throw down big dunks. This pop is also what makes him a factor on the glass in a way that reminds me of Michael Porter Jr. As a sum of his parts, Bailey isn't the grittiest player. However, he's decently tenacious on the boards, pulling down 2 offensive rebounds per game. Bailey leverages his size to get tip-ins or and ones, and I think that he does a good job at creating second chance possessions. Is Bailey's main role ever going to be to rebound? No, definitely not, but he adds value here in a way that, in my opinion, has gone by underrated. Passing is widely seen as Bailey's swing skill, although I like to think of it more as his decision-making. Basically, it's whether Ace will be able to use his immense scoring talents to make life easier for himself and others, or if he'll always play such a difficult style of basketball. The numbers this season were not on Bailey's side. He had 38 assists to 61 turnovers in 30 games, which is pretty bad for a top 5 pick with on-ball responsibilities. I won't get into Bailey's handle since I've already covered that with his finishing and his shot creation, but the same issues still stand. With Ace's passing though, it's more about his processing. When he wants to play make, he'll telegraph his intentions too often. This can be problematic when Bailey uses screens, but I'm also thinking about flashing to the free throw line or facing a numbers advantage. Then, Ace is also too inaccurate too often with his deliveries, even more basic ones on the strong side or on passes that his size should be giving him access to. Bailey is 100% a score-first prospect, and sometimes he's score-only. Ace had 2 or less assists in 24 of his 30 games at Rutgers. But still, I think that he can make some very basic reads. I appreciate when Bailey makes the extra pass, since I think that will be there for him if he spots up even more. Ace will have the gravity as well to make that pass, since his shooting will attract closeouts. The hope then should be that Bailey can eventually flesh out his passing to leverage his size and his shooting. For instance, it would be great to see him slow down out of ball screens to read defenses over the top. Also, if Ace is going to post up or clear out a side so often, then he'll need to get more comfortable scanning the floor to find cutters or bigs. The tools are there for Ace Bailey on defense. The raw production also existed at Rutgers, but the total package is some distance from coming together. First, Bailey measures in well at around 6'9", 6'10", with a wingspan in the ballpark of 7 feet. He'll have to keep filling out his somewhat wiry frame, but Ace moves fluidly and he covers ground. Bailey finished the season with 38 blocks and 30 steals in 30 games. At his best, he's quite disruptive with his length. Ace can fly around to hijack inaccurate passes and then put his open court athleticism to good effect. When he's active in the paint and around the rim, his potential as the low man or as the help is actually tantalizing. Again, Bailey is a better athlete off the ball than on the ball, in my opinion. That means that he's sometimes able to tap into his explosion more functionally on defense. For instance, Bailey's rangy arms are a deterrent when he slides with ball handlers and then rises up to contest their pull-up or drive. Overall, when he uses his length, he's able to alter drives, passes, and finishes. Right now though, I want to stress that these moments are sort of isolated. Over the sum of a game, Bailey still needs a lot of work, but his flashes, youth, and tools can make you believe in his upside. Bailey's biggest improvement point on defense is actually pretty simple, and it's his engagement. A lot of the times, he loses track of what's going on, and in turn, loses track of his man. Sometimes it can be as simple as Ace ball watching. Other times it can be a little more complex, like not understanding where a certain action is going, or not knowing how or when to navigate a screen. But the overall theme here is that Bailey's motor, awareness, and really effectiveness on defense still need a ton of development. The biggest and yet the lowest hanging fruit is probably the ball watching. Fixing this is easier said than done, but it's a must or Bailey will get benched. Just watch these clips here and you can see how this can become an issue. The ball watching also ties into how Ace can give up rebounds. Earlier, I said that I liked Bailey's potential on the glass, and I still do, but that potential comes when he's locked in. The Rutgers wing has room to get even better on the board still with his toughness, motor, and his positioning. This last area also becomes a defining factor in Bailey's rim protection. Sure, the 18-year-old averaged 1.3 blocks per game, but watching the actual games, it felt like he wasn't in the right position enough of the time, and his technique in terms of verticality can still use work. I'm not expecting too much from Ace on defense right now since he's still super young and he'll keep developing on this end, but these are major items to work on and each of them will take time.